It's not about scaling revenue. It's not about scaling cash. It's not about amassing piles of money. It's about scaling impact.
Imagine being a teenager and starting a business from scratch and building it into a multi-million-dollar business. Well, that's exactly what our guest did today. Hi, I'm Joshua Carlsen, and in today's Ask an Expert segment, I'm going to be sitting down with Barrett Ersek. He was able to exit that business and invest that into two more businesses that are both become incredibly successful. The third that he's running today, beyond being successful, is rooted, pun intended, in making the world a better place. Now let's get started. Okay, so Barrett, thank you very much for coming on our Ask an Expert series. I appreciate you coming on.
Sure thing. Happy to be here.
Okay, so I've got a lot to talk about today, but the first thing I want to start with is you were an entrepreneur at quite a young age. So I'd like to first start off with, where did that originate from within you when you're a teenager starting a business?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, my grandfather, he was a life insurance salesman. He was exposed to every sales, self-help kind of book from the 60s and 70s, your Zig Ziglar types, your Napoleon Hills.
Sure.
And he would pay me money to read these books and write a one-page book report. And the two that made the most impact to me that I think really kind of gave me the foundation to think that I could start a business and should start a business at an early age, excuse me, would be Think and Grow Rich and Win Friends and Influence People, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And so he had me read those books and listen to all of the different kinds of tape programs and stuff back then. And so it gave me a sense that I was in control of my destiny and that I could set goals and achieve them. It probably culminated with a Tony Robbins seminar when I was 16 and walking on fire. The whole fire walking thing back then. Tony was in his late 20s, quite a long time ago. But Tony Robbins. We at that program, we kind of talked about overcoming our fears and kind of setting our goals and going for it. And I walked out of that seminar saying, you know what? At the time, I had been working for a company called ChemLawn, selling lawn care services over the phone. And I thought, I've sold a lot of lawn care. I could start my own business with all the business I've been getting for these people. I just have to figure out how to actually fertilize a lawn, which I hadn't known how to do, but I knew how to sell them. I figured if I could sell them, I'll figure out how to fertilize them. And so I came back from that Tony Robbins seminar, called my boss, and quit my job at 16 to start my own company. Okay. And I'm glad that I did because, partially I was too stupid to know I couldn't do it. Because keep in mind, we weren't cutting grass and doing landscaping. I was putting down chemical applications. I had to have a pesticide registration number and insurance. And, it wasn't the type of business you could just kind of do, for the neighbors.
Right.
And so I just started doing it and just started figuring it out. And we killed some lawns and made some mistakes and got audited by the Department of the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection because we weren't keeping our records right, we didn't have our licenses right. So we had to get through all those stumbling blocks.
Right.
But what was really cool is that set me up on a path of entrepreneurship and realizing that I could be in control of my own destiny and make as much money as I wanted to make within reason and within a time frame, but that I could control to some degree my future and my destiny. And then my high school sweetheart, who I met in kindergarten, she when she was 17 and I was 18, and I was 3 weeks into college and doing my business part-time while I'm going to college, we found out she was pregnant.
Okay.
So at that point, I had a decision to make. I decided to marry my high school sweetheart and make her the mother of my child at that point, and now my children and grandchildren. My grandmother of my grandchildren. It's been a 30-year marriage to this day.
Congrats.
Yeah, thank you. And so, but here's the cool thing is, here I am 3 weeks into college, and I remember sitting in the front of my microeconomics class thinking, wow, this is going to be great. I'm so excited to learn microeconomics because they're going to teach me how to really run a business. I've been just making this thing up.
Right.
And I remember the first day I showed up to microeconomics class early with a ton of enthusiasm, and they just start going through the supply and demand XY curve and just some basic stuff in a textbook. And I'm asking this lady real questions about my business and business in general. And she was a good teacher, but she had never experienced business on her own. And so it just wasn't the learning that it was. I was very disheartened by the learning that I thought I was going to get from college within 3 weeks. And I'm not saying that's the way everybody's college experience is.
Right.
And then when my girlfriend became pregnant, I thought, wow, this is my ticket out of college because now I got to go focus on my business in order to support a family. And it's what I really wanted to do, but I didn't think it was what I was supposed to do. Okay. My dad was a PhD in education, superintendent of schools. My brother has a master's degree. I was going to go to college. It wasn't an option really.
Sure.
But here, now I could actually go focus on my business because I had to support a family. And it was also a great, my dad used to always say, you can do anything you want once you figure out what you really have to do. And, I had to grow that business in order to support that family. I had to, create a certain level of income. And so I just worked 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. And because I was scared to death, I wasn't going to be able to support my family.
Sure.
I was so young, and there was no other opportunities to really support a family at 18. But it was great because it gave me early success. And we built that business up doing fertilizing and weed control. And we sold it to the Scotts Group, the people who sell the stuff in the hardware store.
Yeah, for like $2 million, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, over 3.
Over 3, okay.
Yeah, we had over 2 million in revenue, but got over 3 for the business. And I was still in my 20s.
Right.
And so that was really cool that could happen. And I didn't know that could happen. I didn't set off to sell the business. Didn't even know you could sell a business. I was just trying to support a family.
Sure.
But that really gave me a whole new insight into what was possible and how you could create equity value in the millions of dollars out of nothing. Right. I mean, I started that business with maybe $5,000 in my pocket, and to then less than 10 years later have a $3.5 million exit, like, and still my 20s, like that really blew me away. And so then that became a real kind of a winning formula for me throughout the rest of my business career.
Well, it sounds like you've had a really interesting beginning, right? So, much recognition to your grandfather for putting this path in front of you to actually learn these things at such an impressionable age. And those are real tangible, right? It's not the traditional book smarts, but obviously with a father, PhD, like education was important. So now I'm curious, how do you think things would have gone if you weren't, you didn't have this life moment that kind of forced you to commit everything to the business? Where do you think things would have gone differently if you had stuck it out, and got that bachelor's or even a master's?
Yeah, that's interesting. I have thought about that quite a bit. One thing that I think I got was a real head start. When my friends were all partying and having fun, which I intended to do. It wasn't like I was some, goody two-shoe that didn't want to party and have fun. I intended to party and have fun until I realized I was going to be a dad. I didn't burn a lot of time that maybe my friends burned, while they were having fun. And so I got a 4 or 5 year head start on things for sure. The fact that I got into lawn care today, and I should say, agronomy is my passion today, and soil and helping people grow things more efficiently. But then it wasn't. It was just the only job I ever had was working for ChemLawn, and I did lots of sales. So I thought I could sell lawn care.
Right.
And so, maybe I would have found more of a passion that maybe would have led me to a different kind of business.
Okay.
I do think about that from time to time. Like, was I really supposed to get into lawn care, or did lawn care pick me? Did I pick lawn care? It was just an accidental thing. Right. At the end of the day, I'm not sure it really matters. The nice thing about lawn care was it was recurring revenue. It was high gross margin. It was a sales and marketing business at the end of the day, in addition to agronomy and production and logistics. But sales and marketing was the hub of it. And that's what I was really good at. It didn't matter whether I was selling computers or lawn care.
Right.
I was a sales and marketing guy, and ultimately became an innovation guy through my experience in lawn care and how that impacted that world. So I'm not sure which way it would have gone. I don't think I would have gotten a real job for a very long period of time because I don't think I was super employable.
Okay.
I just didn't have that ADD and just I always had ADD, so always had a hard time in school. I did well at ChemLawn because it was a sales job that I got paid per lead. So if I didn't work, they didn't pay me. If I worked, so I got paid per lead, and I was sort of in control of my own schedule. But I never was good at getting in line and showing up on time and doing what I'm told. I always want to find a new way, a better way, in my way, and I like to do 5 things at one time. And so I'm not sure I would have been super employable, but hard to say. I've never really had a job as an adult.
Okay. Well, good for you, right? I mean, yeah. Life hands you the hands, and it's how you adapt to the hands that are given to you. Let's talk about the company you have today. I'm actually I did a little bit of research, but certainly by no means am an expert. I think you might frown upon the lawn that is out in front of my house. So tell me a little bit about what you guys are doing there.
Yeah. So the company that we have today, which is this is our third startup. We had the first one, which I sold to Scotts. We had a second one called Happy Lawn. We sold that one to ChemLawn, which was my first employer.
Okay. Well, let's talk about that, because that must have been somewhat rewarding for you.
Yeah, no, that was good. It was, again, I didn't really know for sure that I was going to be able to sell it, but it was another lawn care business, pretty much just like the first one.
Okay.
But we put down fertilizer and killed people's weeds using chemicals mostly. So we're a chemical fertilizer application company.
Yeah.
And one of our unlocking moves was, though, back in early 2000s, with my first business, I realized that the act of measuring lawns, we used to send people out to measure lawns to get square footages.
Yep.
That's how we knew how to price. So when you wanted an estimate, the first thing, if you want to buy lawn care, the first thing we had to do is send somebody out to measure your lawn, and then we call you and try to sell you some package, and then you'd say yes, and then we do the lawn. So that whole process was kind of expensive and time consuming for a relatively small ticket product. So we came up with an unlocking move that if we could take our cost per sale back then used to be $275 to get a new customer on the book. So that's all of our marketing costs, all of our sales costs, our estimating costs divided by the number of customers we would get. Yep. Average cost per sale was $275. Now, revenue per customer was $400 annually. Our gross margins were 50%, so $200 profit. So it would take us 6 quarters to pay for our acquisition cost of a new customer. The only reason it worked at all is because we keep our customers 5-6 years. So eventually they would start to pay for themselves.
Right.
But it was an impediment to growth because the faster you grew, the less money you had because it was always this negative cash from the cost of sale.
Sure.
I said, hey, what if I could get my cost per sale from $275 down to $27? Through some learning with Vern Harnish, that he had kind of helped me think that question through. Vern Harnish of Gazelles and Scaling Up.
Yeah.
So I started thinking, if I could go from 275 down to 27, my business would change dramatically. So I got obsessed about that question, tried lots of different avenues, but eventually came up with a method to use aerial photography, GIS imaging, and tax map data to measure lawns with basically a web tool. Today you think of it as Google Earth. Back then, Google Earth didn't exist.
Right.
So it's really rocket science. But I hired some people to help us put that tool together. And I never got it to 27, by the way, but I did get it to 50. So our cost per sale went down to 50.
Okay.
Once that happened, and by the way, that was right when I was getting ready to sell Scott's. I was working on this. So I sold the Scott's. Now I got a big pile of money. Yeah. So now I can really invest
into this.
Right? Yeah. Which was not really working. It was conceptually there, but it wasn't functional.
Yep.
We got it really, we spent money and time getting that thing right. I didn't have a business. I could just work on the innovation.
Sure.
And then once I got it right, I knew I could start another company and replace my old business quickly. And so that's what we did. That became the second business called Happy Lawn. I had a non-compete for Philly, so we went to Baltimore. So geographically, I could still do the business. I just couldn't do it where I used to do it.
Yep.
So we went to Baltimore with this new web estimation tool. My first business, it took me, 7 years, 8 years, 9 years to get it to $2 million in revenue. The second business, because I had some money in the bank I could put into marketing. I knew how to market in a very predictable way. And I reduced my cost per sale so I could take my marketing dollars and turn them over a lot faster, because $50, that would come back to me quickly in profit. And then I could spend it again.
Right.
So we were able to grow that business to $2 million within 7 months. And then we went 2 million, 5 million, 8 million, 10 million. That business started to really scale because we had one bottleneck we unlocked around cost per sale. It created a bunch of other challenges because we grew too fast and we had all kinds of service issues, and it wasn't all sunshine and roses. But we did fix the sales bottleneck. So that allowed me to grow that business rapidly. And then through that process, I started looking at, what's in this process that Vern taught me, which is around finding your X factor and finding industry bottlenecks that you have, and so does the rest of your industry. Solve those bottlenecks, get a lot of leverage, and grow your company, grow your impact, grow your revenues. And so that first one was that aerial estimation deal because we had to reduce our cost per sale.
Yep. That
was a problem I had. That was a problem ChemLawn had. Everybody had. Then through the next, now as I grew the company, I started looking at what's the next problem with our industry. And I started thinking, well, it's the chemical lawn care business, right? And the green movement is upon us. Our industry is not going to exist if it doesn't address the fact that we're putting the quality of our lawns ahead of the quality of our bays, our ponds, our lakes, our streams.
Yeah, right.
It just doesn't make any sense. And not to mention the fact that my favorite pastime is fishing. And so the very thing I did to make a living actually negatively impacted the waterways and made there less fish, specifically in Chesapeake Bay, which is where I was fishing. It's where my lawn care business was based. And it's one of the most vulnerable waterways because it's so urbanized and suburbanized, and the runoff, tremendous amount of runoff, and it's a very shallow body of water. So a small amount of nutrient runoff affects it in a big way. And so started to get a lot of press around nutrient runoff into the bay and how it was really impacting the shell life and the fish life, the marine life. And lawn care was a piece of the puzzle. I could argue it was a tiny piece of the puzzle. It was really, outdated septic systems and homeowners over applying and whatever. But nonetheless, lawn care became one of the targets. And so I thought, well, I can either sit here and debate this or I can solve this. And so we started looking at how can we create green, weed-free lawns around the bay. How can we make sure that the quality of our lawn does not come at the expense of the quality of our waterways? How can we reduce nitrate, phosphate, and pesticide runoff, but still give people what they want, green, weed-free lawns? And so we started looking at lots of different technologies to do that, and lots of trial and error. Through that process, I met a kind of a mad scientist type guy who had a microbial formulation that had evolved from something. His grandfather was an organic farmer, back to the early 1900s. And he learned a lot of things from his grandfather that helped the soil and helped the crops, but nobody really knew why. It was sort of like they just had these rituals that they did, and things worked better when they did them.
Right.
And part of it was how they harvested and treated and grew microbiology. Nobody really knew what the microbiology was. They just knew the soil got better when they did these things. So that put him on a 20-year path of really learning about microbiology and understanding what bacteria, fungi, protozoa, and amoeba combinations really drive soil health and functionality of soil. And at the end of the day, if we can get the soil really teeming with beneficial microorganisms, those microorganisms act like little mini fertilizer factories. They access nutrients that are not available to the plant, but they convert them, make them available to the plant. So it doesn't replace the need for fertilizers. It doesn't replace the need for pesticides. But if we get the soil really, really functional, we can dramatically improve the efficiency of fertilizers and dramatically reduce our need for pesticides. Okay. And so it wasn't to a chemical-free panacea, but it was to hey, can we reduce nitrates, phosphates, and pesticides by 50 or 75% by getting the microbiology right in the soil? And so I started to partner with this mad scientist guy on trying to find a way for us to do this with our lawn care application business. I became his largest customer, invested in his company in order to basically ensure that we could continue to get production.
What you needed, right?
Yeah, raw materials. And then learn more and more about it. And the more I learned about it, the more I thought, holy cow, this is a really big idea that needs to be championed. It wasn't ready for prime time, and we were doing it, and we were getting a result, but there was a lot of hurdles we had to jump through to make it use back then. But I could see the potential. So at that point, I took my playbook out from my last business, sell the business, get the cash to innovate the next business. Right. Basically called up the big players who, are always in kind of a roll-up appetite kind of mentality. And Chemlon was the biggest one, owned by KKR at the time, and the private equity group. And so we did a deal with them and sold that Happy Lawn business for more than $10 million. Okay. And took that money, invested in the business with the mad scientist. In fact, bought that IP, bought his formulas, brought him in as an R&D guy. Okay. And then we started to bring in a couple other PhDs to help us kind of make it better and more mainstream. With the vision at first of revolutionizing the lawn care industry, how can we, become the Whole Foods of lawn care and help other large, let's say, regional companies that look like my old company. Mm-hmm. So we didn't want to go out and create another lawn care company and have guys and trucks and spraying lawns, just because we thought the bandwidth that we had was limited. So we want to focus it on the product and go get that product to other people who are really good at managing guys and trucks in their markets. So we didn't have to do that piece of it. We didn't create as much value there. So we went and partnered with a bunch of lawn care companies around the country, independents. We couldn't get any national guys to listen to us. So instead, we went to a bunch of independents in every city that competed with the national guys and helped them convert their methodology over to be more of a earth-friendly, kind of Whole Foods of lawn care approach, using our products, using our technology. We would then supply them with the raw materials. And so, we did that. And today we've got, over 1,000 lawn care companies used our product as part of their program across the country. And then we moved into golf courses and sports turf. Over 700 golf courses are using our products to help reduce nitrates, phosphates, pesticides, improve playability, sustainability of the golf courses. Sports turf, bunch of who's who, professional NFL, MLB type fields. And then ultimately we're now moving into agriculture, which I think is our biggest opportunity. And so we're no longer trying to revolutionize the lawn care industry. We're trying to our purpose statement is to revolutionize the way the world grows.
Okay.
And you can just fill in the blank. It could be growing grass, could be growing trees, shrubs, flowers, corn, soy, cotton, wheat, cannabis, hemp, you name it. If it grows in the soil, we can help it grow better, more efficiently, and more sustainably by harnessing the power of soil microbes. And so that's our current business. Is we manufacture this proprietary consortium of microbes to help different crops grow more efficiently.
Okay. Well, it sounds like, I mean, you've through hard work, through street smarts, you've positioned yourself to see an opportunity, and you've had the fortune of being able to cash out of a business and then use those as the investment to start this next thing. What are ways you think businesses can approach the same kind of thought process today, that may not be able, they may not have that exit, that cash out strategy. But my takeaway that I'm getting is you're constantly evaluating the marketplace and saying, hey, the needs have changed. There's a way to do something different. Businesses, I think, a lot of times just get kind of stuck in the rut. This is the business we do. How do they avoid doing that, and how can they, purposefully try to, reevaluate the marketplace to adapt their business to changing times?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I have two questions here. One is around financing. The other is around sort of innovation of business strategy. So let's go to business strategy first. So again, this all started with Vern Harnish at our MIT Birthing a Giants program through EO, which is now called the Entrepreneurial Masters Program. There's no certificate involved from MIT. I just want to be clear about that.
Sure.
Just plain, it's at MIT. It's an EO program. But Vern Harnish is my teacher, and he taught me about this idea of founding industry bottlenecks. And so it really comes down to finding the right question, and always be looking for that question as an executive team or an entrepreneur. Is what is the one thing about my industry that's just messed up, that if I could fix it, it could catapult either my profitability or my growth or both, my impact, however you want to say that. And so I have a specific methodology around doing this, and I wrote a Harvard HBR article on it that I can share with your audience if you'd like.
Yeah, we'll link to it.
And that takes you through a step-by-step process on how to identify your industry bottlenecks. And then how to pick one of those industry bottlenecks that you're going to work on to create your innovation strategy, which should lead, if you get it right, should lead to your growth strategy, and help propel your business to having bigger impact, bigger revenues, bigger profits.
Yep.
Doesn't always work just like that. I can tell you a bunch of times I swung the bat and missed. Yep. Here we've told you about 2 that worked. I tried 20, right?
Yeah.
2 worked. Other ones either worked incrementally or didn't work at all.
That's part of the process, right?
Absolutely, yeah. But it's about always looking for that industry bottleneck.
Right.
Now, it's really important to understand the difference between a business bottleneck and an industry bottleneck.
Okay.
We mostly, as entrepreneurs and business owners, we work on business bottlenecks. These are problems that we have with our business, but you look at your top 3 biggest competitors, they may not have those problems. So boy, if I had the right warehousing, then I could really grow my business. If I had the right CFO, then I could grow my business. Right sales manager, then that's your problem, and you have to solve those problems, or you're going to go out of business. But solving those problems basically allows you to stay in the game and maybe grow incrementally, but it doesn't give you that exponential leverage. And so we have to have a discipline as an entrepreneur and as leaders of entrepreneurial companies to step away from the business bottlenecks for just small periods of time, like not too much because that's dangerous. It's like letting go of the steering wheel.
Yep.
But have some discipline to spend at least 10% of our strategic planning time around industry bottlenecks, not business bottlenecks. An industry bottleneck is a bottleneck that you have, and so do your top 3 competitors in your industry. Right. And that means the big problem that if you solve that, you're going to get exponential leverage, and you're going to have an unfair competitive advantage over your competition. Okay. And that's where entrepreneurial companies get really exciting, because that's where entrepreneurial companies can just change the entire playing field.
Sure.
In a way that big companies can't do as well. And so I've had a lot of fun, in that process. To me, that's my favorite part about business, is solving those big problems. And looking for that big leverage. And as I say, it's not easy. And if it was easy, obviously you'd hear about these things all the time. You gotta constantly work at it. But when you hit it, it's big and it's good. And so this HBR article around finding your industry bottlenecks, it really starts with a question. So first you identify the bottleneck, and then you turn that bottleneck into a metrically driven question. So if you remember my first business, it was, how can I go from sales cost of sale from 275 down to 27? So notice I didn't say, how do I reduce my cost per sale by 10 times? Because if you don't really think about where you're starting at and where you're going to, it's really hard to measure. It's hard to visualize. It's hard to really think through all the steps that make why is a cost per sale $275? Well, where are the biggest parts of that?
Right.
And so getting the metrically driven question around that industry bottleneck is really key. And then getting your team focused on that industry, on that metrically driven question. So that would kind of be my advice in a really, really brief, kind of soundbite on how to think through strategic innovation. And as I say, this article that I wrote, I think could take your readers through it step by step if they're more interested in getting the details of it. Now to go to your other question, which was how do we finance if we can't sell a company and have a couple $1 million to go build the next one?
Right.
And look, I've had even though I sold my companies for lots of money, there's been periods of my business growth where I was totally out of money. Even though you would think, oh look, he had millions of dollars. Yeah, and I spent millions of dollars. It doesn't always work just like you think it's going to work. And so we've had to get resourceful on how to grow the business. And Professor John Mullins wrote a really good book called The Customer Funded Business. Okay. And that's kind of like one of my blueprints to go to, when we're trying to grow without consuming a lot of cash. And there's a lot of ways to think through, again, it goes back to, I think about everything in what's the big question. And so if I were to try to grow my company today with no cash, the thing I would say to myself is, who has the most to gain within my kind of stakeholders, which could be suppliers, it could be other constituents, doesn't have to be your customers. Mm-hmm. But who has the most to gain for my success of my business, and who has the most to lose if I can't scale this business, if I don't have the cash to do that, and then who on those two lists might have some cash that you can help find a way to get them to partner with you. Strategic partnerships, buying inventory in advance, getting on a subscription model so that they're paying on a steady basis for something that you're value added that may not cost you a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And even in my first lawn care business, back when we were trying to grow that business, we used to offer a prepaid discount to our homeowners. Yep. And we would do it in November and December and January. And the prepaid discount would get less each month. So it'd start off at 10%, then go to 8%, then go to 6%. And we would get all of our money in December, January, and February from the prepays. Yep. Eventually, we got the 40% of our customers paid us in advance. We'd have, in our worst cash flow time of the year, historically, became our best cash flow time of the year.
Right.
And then what was cool is we could use that money to then go market to new customers, because you market early in the season.
Get ahead of it.
Buy. And so then we could use that money to do marketing in February, March, and April. And then all of our new customers, we gave them the opportunity to prepay, and 20 to 40% would. And so then we would use that money to then funnel another wave of marketing. Okay. And we have to prepay. And so at the end of the year, we'd end up with a small profit from, the customers that, and we had good gross margins, so we could do that. If you don't have good gross margins, then that model might not work as well.
Okay.
But that was my first business. We did that quite a bit. The other thing we did is we, at one point in the second business, I saw my accounts receivable grow to $1 million, on, let's say, a $10 million business. And keep in mind, our average single invoice was like $89. So $1 million of $89 invoices.
A lot of invoices.
It was burdensome to collect, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it wasn't even worth collecting, right? If anyone paid a bill, you almost just flushed it down the toilet and said, oh, well, easier to go sell somebody else new than it is to collect this money. So then we started changing our sales process to where we said, because we used to leave an invoice at your door and you'd send us a check, right? I mean, this is the old days, but it's like early 2000s. Then I just changed my sales guys around. I said, look, you have three options, and you close every sale with prepay or auto pay. Which do you prefer? We didn't give them an opportunity to pay when you feel like it, unless it was, and this happened. We had a little old lady, type person who's, I'm not giving a credit card over the phone, but they're, you're willing to take a risk. And so then you make them argue almost to go to pay when you feel like it. We didn't want to lose the sale, so we still had some pay when you feel like it.
Yeah.
But prepay and auto pay were the
default.
We gave them a choice.
Right.
And once we started our salespeople close that way, we also changed their commission, that if they got to pay when you feel like it, they got no commission. Auto pay got one commission, and a prepay got a higher commission.
Okay.
All of a sudden, we got our accounts receivable, we eliminated within 2 years of that initiative, was 90% reduced. So again, look at who can pay for your. Where is the cash getting sucked in your cash cycle to where you can free it up, and it's either on payables, it's on receivables, it's on getting prepaid. All of these things can help you finance a business with really no cash.
Okay. Well, so I'm curious. Obviously, a lot of businesses are suffering right now. I'm curious what kind of impacts you guys have seen as this pandemic has, kind of spread across the nation.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, I have to say I feel blessed. I have foreign brothers that are in the restaurant business and the hair salon business, and it's
Yeah,
whole different set of circumstances for those guys,
sure.
and really have been totally impressed at their resiliency to continue to look for ways to operate their businesses, keep their people around, and they're going to get through this. There's the couple guys I'm thinking about. So I'm blessed. We're considered an essential service.
Okay.
So I never stopped coming to the office, and we were doing production all the way through. That being said, we were still impacted. Golf courses, is about 20% of our revenue comes from golf course industry. The golf course industry basically slashed all their budgets to almost zero until they're coming back now.
Yeah.
But they weren't sure what was going to happen. So every superintendent stopped buying anything extra, just the basics. And so we lost a bunch of golf revenue. The other thing that, and lawn care revenue too, was, there were certain markets that were more shut down than others. And some of the like West Coast markets, spring lawn care applications got delayed, and that impacted our demand. One of our bigger ones that you wouldn't have thought of came from our corn farmers. So corn has been a big growing market for us. It's our highest growth. Corn and soy are our highest growing segments of business right now. And the corn farmer uses us at time of planting. And we had a bunch of corn farmers committed to use our product over the wintertime.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden oil went to zero or negative, actually negative $37 a barrel, I think is the low.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, corn farmers are tied to oil through ethanol.
Okay.
So because about 20% of the corn we produce gets turned into ethanol at different years, is different percentages, but a significant portion, let's just say that.
Yep.
And so all of a sudden, a bushel of corn was reduced by 30% overnight. And all of a sudden the farmers pulled back on any extra inputs and went to bare bones. And so we lost a bunch of revenue, in relation to that. That was totally unexpected.
Sure.
So that was a challenge. And then, just trying to operate a business with social distancing, we manufacture. So we have a production line that doesn't think about how far apart you are. It thinks about how efficient it is to pack something, right?
Right.
So we had to totally rework that. And we did get a scare where one of our guys got sick. We didn't know if it was COVID or not. It wasn't, thank God. But for 2 weeks, we weren't sure. And it was during the peak. And you start thinking about, wow, we're at the peak of our production. If all of a sudden my production crew can't produce what we need to produce, I'm not sure what we're going to do. It could have been, it wouldn't have been business ending, but it would have made my year a zero, damn near a zero.
Yeah.
And so luckily that didn't happen. We ended up going to, we did change our shifts around so that people were, less on top of each other, and changed our production methodology. Everything got slower. Some of our raw materials, by the way, come from China. That got all screwed up, and we had to source domestically and pay twice for a bunch of raw materials because China never got to us, but you had to prepay for it.
Okay.
Good news is we now have some good domestic sources that we weren't motivated to look for before.
Yeah.
More money, but it's not really more money when you look at all the hassles. And I'm not saying that's true for everything and everybody, but it did force us to go domestic with some of our sourcing, which I think will be an advantage long term.
Okay.
But it was a screw up, in the spring. And then logistics in general was just a nightmare. We shipped things all over the country, and trucking was really challenging and really expensive. During the peak of the COVID. Things are settling down now, but so with all of that, it was a big challenge. But nothing. We're still up year over year. We're not up as much as we would have been.
But being up any percentage is a
huge win.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So what advice do you have for the brothers that have the restaurants or the salons? What kind of business insights have you thought of as you look at them?
Yeah, it's a really good question. One of my mantras is you can't control what happens to you. You can only control how you respond to what happens to you.
Sure.
But that response makes all the difference into your future and into your present. And so, I would just look at these opportunities and you have a right to complain and bitch and moan and say, woe is me. And then when you're done doing that, then get up and say, okay, what can I do to positively impact my business? Where is there an opportunity? Obviously, in the restaurant business, they're all going digital and delivery and all that stuff. And that's not sustainable in everybody's business, but it's opportunities for you to start to think through evolving your business model. One of the things that I thought was a really interesting opportunity, and you got to get through today's challenges and get enough cash to live to tomorrow. But, if I were to ask those guys their biggest challenges, in January, both of them would have told me hiring good people.
Okay.
They're not around and we can't scale without good people.
Yep.
Well, right now in both of those industries, there's a lot of people that are really confused that are probably not getting strong leadership from their business owners, their executive management teams, whatever you want to say. So here's an opportunity. Two things. One is to reach out to your base of your strongest people that you really want to stay committed to, and make sure they feel part of your team. Make sure they understand part of the long-term vision, and that this is a temporary imbalance and we're going to get through it, so that you don't lose your key people. And two is maybe it's time to start building your bench. Obviously, you're not going to start hiring today necessarily, but start building a bench, start recruiting, because there are people out there that are lost, that aren't getting the strong messages from their owners and from their managers. And if you could have an impact to building the bench and recruiting some good talent, this might be an opportunity to do that. The way that you can, inspire, energy, enthusiasm, and vision. And then I just think it's always the way for you to look at making things more efficient, making things, changing the business model, trying to find a way to stand out. Anytime there's problems, the people who solve those problems are the ones that get ahead. So, look, everybody's has, within certain markets, everybody's has the same challenges around the dining room doesn't work, because we can only have 30% of the people in the dining room, or it's shut down altogether or whatever, and it's got to be outside. Okay, how do we make outside more creative? Where's outside space I can grab and package it a different way? How can we create more of an event outside, and be the ones that take outside dining and not just do it because we have to, but elevate it, because you have an opportunity now to kind of solve that problem and have the consumer feel better about, this challenging time. These are daydreams I have. I don't know that any of them are home runs, but those are the kind of things I'd be thinking about.
Okay. Well, so a lot's been said over the past couple of months for college graduates, right? It's like the worst year to graduate kind of thing, but there's opportunity, and so I would like to maybe not necessarily look at the college graduate, include them as well, but you're a college kid. What recommendations or what advice do you give these young, future leaders in this time that we're at right now?
Yeah. So if you're a college kid or even a new graduate, my suggestion would be, I'm imagining they learn lots of good stuff at college. I don't really know if they do or don't. By the way, I have two daughters who I've put through, college. And so I had some insights.
You got some insights.
But at the end of the day, I think there's a set of learning that we're not getting from college. And, I think there's some, we can learn macroeconomics or microeconomics, as I was explaining at the beginning of my college career. But we don't learn true financial intelligence and entrepreneurship. We don't learn some of those skills that, there's a lot of information out there that we can consume in a different way. And I would say that, to be a lifelong learner is to create lots and lots of options. And I would encourage somebody who's graduating college not to say, hey, I just got my degree and I know everything, now I need that job. But hey, I just learned a basic level of education in my profession. Now, how do I go get those other skills that are really important, those life skills? And so to me, if you want to be an entrepreneur, and I don't know why anybody wouldn't, frankly, but I'm sure there's reasons, depending on where people are coming from. But, the E-Myth is a great, first read for somebody who's even just starting to think about entrepreneurship by Michael Gerber. As I said, that Win Friends and Influence People, Think and Grow Rich. My kids all read those books when they were 13 because of the impact they made to me with my grandfather. The ideas around goal setting and around things like Rich Dad, Poor Dad and basic financial intelligence, the difference between good debt and bad debt and cash flow, sales and marketing and entrepreneurship. To me, if you have those skills, you will create opportunity no matter where you land and no matter what the economy is doing. And if you don't have those skills, you will always be relying on somebody else to give you your opportunity. And hopefully your specialized skill set is a valuable commodity to that person, or that industry or whatever for long enough that you can create a career. But if your special skill set goes out of favor because the world changes as it's doing rapidly, right, and you want to be in entrepreneurship, financial intelligence, and goal setting and how to create your own opportunities and solve problems, to me, that's what the world needs more of, is people taking responsibility for what happens to them and trying to find ways to solve problems in a way that makes the world a better place, somehow making products and services cheaper, safer, better, more convenient. And if you do that, you'll always add value, and you always have value in return.
Great advice. So I like to finish with one question, which is, if you could go back to that 17-year-old, that 16-year-old, and you could impart some advice that you have gained along the way, and it sounds like you had a lot to start with. So again, kudos to the grandfather. But what do you think you might say to help yourself out over your career?
It's not about scaling revenue. It's not about scaling cash. It's not about amassing piles of money. It's about scaling impact. It's like, what have you done with your business that's made the world a better place by making products better, cheaper, safer, more convenient, adding value in a way that nobody's done before? I got stuck in the same, kind of chase of the dollar that I think many entrepreneurs get stuck with. I mean, first it's, hey, I got to support a family, and nothing else matters but, pay a mortgage and make sure that they can go to the grocery store. Then you get to a certain level of income, and then it starts to be about how big your stack of dollars can be, and whether or not you can buy a fancy boat or a fancy car or a second home or whatever. Mm-hmm. And, I think we start to work for those things. And as soon as we start to work for those things, I think it becomes, and that happened to me. Yep. It becomes less fun. It starts to become about protecting what you've got as opposed to creating more. You start playing not to win. Or you start playing not to lose as opposed to playing to win. Yeah. And life gets, you go from a sense of faith and abundance to a sense of fear and scarcity, even though the piles of money are bigger than they've ever been. And so I would go back and say, focus on scaling impact. The money will follow. Don't focus on scaling money ahead of impact, because that will lead to more challenges for you. So that would have been one of my biggest lessons that took me some time to learn through my journey.
Well, that's a great insight. So, well, Barrett, I appreciate you coming on. Wish you and your extended family and their businesses success as we go through this rocky times, and would love to have you back on in the future.
Yeah, I'd love to be whatever I can do to be helpful. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Good talking to you.